Hi everyone, welcome back to Art of the Part. In this video, we're going to take a look at making a cast mold assembly in SolidWorks using the Arbor P1 and the Arbor P2 that we were working on in the last video. You can see here on the screen we have the Arbor P1 configuration active. This is going to be our traditional CNC milled part because we have nice perpendicular edges to machine. However, this would be a difficult part to pull from the mold because we don't have any drafts. So this is why we created additional configurations so that we could use this for our mold making purposes. So I'll take a look here in the left hand side of my configurations manager. I'm going to double click on the cast P2 and you can see here that we did add that 3-degree draft. We have nice smooth edges. However, we still have these through holes for the final product. And while that might be important to have for your CAST P2 static study, these through holes are actually going to prevent you from pulling the part from the mold because after you pour the material, you're going to create these crossbars or these bridges that are just going to lock the part into place. Which is why we created this separate configuration for the mold P2. And this is basically just going to be the cast P2, but we filled or suppressed all the through holes so that we can actually pull the part from the mold. Additionally, I created the shell extra configuration, and this isn't going to be necessary for your Arbor Press case study. However, I just wanted to show you how we could take what we learned in the last video when we cut the part in half and just add one extra feature for a shell command to create this thin-walled part. And this is going to be important for components like the plastic housing of a power drill or a valve cover for a combustion engine. And this mold making methodology is going to be known as core cavity mold making. However, I'm going to wait till the end of the video to show that, so we're just going to jump back here into our milled P1 configuration, and then I'll return back here to the isometric view, and we can start a new SolidWorks assembly from this component. So up in the top left, we'll go to File, and then we'll find the Make Assembly from Part. You should see the assembly icon next to that. Click on Make Assembly, and this should open up a new SolidWorks assembly for you. On the left-hand side, you can see that we're trying to begin the assembly, and below this, the parts in the assembly to be inserted is going to be that Arbor Press P1 because we currently have that open in the background. Likewise, we told SolidWorks that we wanted to make an assembly from this part. Additionally, as long as we have that Arbor Press P1 highlighted here on the left-hand side, we have the ability to control what configuration is going to be imported into the assembly. So below this, you should see our configuration section, and we currently have the milled P1 configuration active. This is going to be a drop-down menu. If you click on that, we can now see our cast P2, our mold P2, and our shell extra configuration. So let's see what happens when we activate the cast P2 configuration. And just as a disclaimer, whenever you're trying to change configurations on this begin assembly insert new component, there's like a little glitch where it doesn't recognize you changing the configuration. You might have to click the part and then click it again to reawaken it. And then we're going to come up here to the top left-hand corner and hit the green check mark. And what we're trying to do is lock the origin of this part to the origin of the assembly. And this is going to be important because when we make the left and the right side mold, we're going to reference the right plane of the assembly. So if the right plane of the assembly doesn't match the right plane of the part, our molds are going to be offset and we're not going to get the result that we want. So as a quick double check, let's take a look at the origin of our assembly. So down here in the feature tree, I'm going to click on origin, and you're going to see that highlight in blue in the viewport there at the bottom of the piece. And then we also want to check the origin of our part. So where it says Arbor Press P1, to the left of it, there's a little black arrow. We're going to expand this out to see the entire feature tree of that part. And we can also find an origin located here. So if I hover my mouse over this origin and I just kind of like move it off, move it on, you can see that the origin in the viewport is changing from blue to orange. And that's telling me that those origins are lined up. So we should be good to go moving forward in our mold making process. I'm just going to collapse this Arbor Press P1 down again, so I'll hit the black arrow, and we're just going to return back to a shortened feature tree. Now, you might be wondering why we imported the cast P2 configuration as opposed to the mold P2 configuration, and that's because I wanted to show you my preferred method in controlling configurations in assemblies. So we're just going to come down here to the Arbor Press P1 in our feature tree, right-click on that part, and this is going to open up a drop-down menu. At the top of the menu, you can actually see the drop-down menu we were looking at before for those configurations when we inserted the part. So if you hit this drop-down menu for cast P2, we can see our milled P1, the mold P2, the shell extra, so on and so forth. Let's just go ahead and click on the mold P2, and then we can hit the green check mark. And this is just a little bit more reactive, but we changed the configuration here in our viewport. Likewise, we can right-click on the part inside the viewport, and you're going to get that same menu. We just want to make sure we're here on the mold P2 configuration, and we can begin making our left and right side mold. Now, typically, whenever we're working within an assembly, we're creating components outside of the assembly, and then we're bringing them in one by one and then mating them together. This is a concept known as bottom-up modeling. However, I wanted to show you how we can create new components in the assembly referencing this part so that we're not jumping back and forth. And this is going to be a concept known as top-down modeling. So let's go ahead and move over here to the top left-hand corner into our Assemblies tab. And inside the Assembly tab, I want you to look for Insert Components. And instead of clicking on this feature and bringing in pre-drawn parts one by one, we're actually just going to hit the drop-down menu here, and we're going to look for an option called New Part. So click on New Part, and you'll see down here in the feature tree, we're adding a new part to this assembly, and we now have a green check mark next to our mouse. And that green check mark is trying to determine a face or a plane to drop this new part onto in the assembly. So in the left-hand side, I'm going to drop this new part here on the right plane. So I'll click on the right plane of the assembly, and this is going to allow us to create that left and right side mold from the center of the part. Additionally, when you create a new part in an assembly, you're going to see some visual feedback. First, up here in the top left-hand corner, you can see that we're currently editing a component. And that's going to allow you to do your sketch commands, your feature commands, and anything that you're normally used to doing inside of a part outside of an assembly. Additionally, you're going to see below that we have this part that we're currently working on highlighted in blue. And this is giving us some confirmation that we're currently editing this component. So just make sure that you have both of these visual cues active before continuing on. Additionally, whenever you create a new part in an assembly, you're going to default to a new sketch inside that part on whatever face or plane that you selected. And you're getting that feedback here because you can see that we're in the Sketch tab and we have the ability to exit the sketch. So that means we're sitting here on the right plane inside of this part, and I'm just going to reorientate my view so that I'm looking at that right plane so I can begin sketching my mold. So I'll come out here, hit the space button, and I'll go to the right plane. Now we just want to draw a corner rectangle that encompasses this entire part, and we'll use that to extrude out our mold. So in the top left here, let's make sure that we're in the Sketch tab, and then inside a sketch, I want you to look for your corner rectangle inside the gallery. We'll hit the drop-down menu and make sure that you are drawing the corner rectangle. I don't want to snap this or make this coincident with anything. I'm just going to move this to the bottom right of my origin, click once, and then I'll drag out a rectangle here to the top left, and then I'll hit escape because I don't want to draw any more rectangles. Next, we'll smart dimension this. So inside the Sketch tab, I'll find smart dimension, and I'll make this a 1 inch by 1 inch offset from the origin. So I'll click on the origin, I'll click on this Y line here, I'll make that 1 inch, and then I'll click on the origin once again, click on the bottom X line, make that 1 inch. And the width of the part here, this is going to be 7.75, so 7.75, and the height of this is going to be 8.75. Okay, so I'm going to then fit this back to my screen here, and you can see all those dimensions. I'll leave this up here for just 1 second. Again, it's a 1 inch by 1 inch offset, 8.75 high, and 7.75 wide. From here, we're going to extrude this out a distance of 2 inches, so I'm just going to reorientate myself to the isometric view. That way it's a little bit easier to see this extrusion. So I'll hit the space button, I'll go to the isometric view, and then I'm going to jump over here to the top left in my Features tab, and then I'm going to find my Extruded Boss Base. Click on Extruded Boss Base, and we're going to leave this as a blind extrusion. However, we are going to update this to 2 inches. And instead of this going to the right, so this would be the right side mold, let's start with the left side mold, and I'm just going to reverse this extrusion. So click on these 2 arrows here, and this will make it a little bit easier to see as we're going through the next steps. So hit the green check mark, and you can see that we have this mold extrusion now that's encompassing our entire part. Next, we're going to use the body of the mold P2 configuration to remove material from this extrusion that we just created. And we're going to have to use a feature called cavity. Unfortunately, by default, this is not active on your feature tab, so we're going to have to look for it. It's going to be located here in the top toolbar under Insert, so click on Insert, it's going to drop down this menu, and we're going to look for the third option called Features. If you hover your mouse over Features, it's going to open or expand out another menu, and we're just going to look for a feature called Cavity. It's about halfway down, maybe just a little bit below that, but click on Cavity, and it's going to start up this Cavity command. And what Cavity is trying to do is it's trying to remove a body or a specific feature from an existing extrusion. So currently we're working off this extrusion in this part that we created, and the design component that we want to remove from it is going to be the Arbor Press Mold P2 configuration. So we're just going to click on this Arbor Press P2 mold, and it's going to highlight over there in our design components. Now, if you're unable to select the body of the Arbor Press for this cavity feature, it's probably because your assembly transparency is currently set to forced transparency. So as a bad example, I just want to show you what this looks like. I'm going to right-click, clear the selections, and then where it says assembly transparency, if you click on this, it's going to open up a drop-down menu, and you might be currently set to forced transparency. And if your part is transparent, you can't click on it, and it's going to give you this warning saying that the cavity part cannot be the same as the base part. I'm just going to hit OK, and if I want to correct this, I'm just going to come back up here to my assembly transparency, click on it. From the drop-down menu, we're going to change this to opaque, and then once the model is opaque, we can click on it, and this is going to populate your design components over here on the left-hand side with that Arbor Press P2 mold configuration. Now, whenever we use the cavity feature, we also have scale parameters to consider, and this has to do with molten material being poured at its melting point, so when it returns back to room temperature, it's probably going to shrink. So you might want to include a percentage like 3 to 7% depending on the material that you're using. However, in this example, we're just going to use 0% and we're going to make this size on size. So let's hit the green check mark to complete this cavity feature. And once it's all said and done, it's not going to look like anything happened. And that's primarily because the material that we just removed using the cavity feature is currently being hidden by the body of the Arbor Press. So on the left-hand side in our feature tree, I'm going to right-click on that Arbor Press, and it's going to open up this drop-down menu, and we're going to look for this icon that has an eyeball with a line through it. It's going to be called Hide Components. We'll click on that. And that's going to temporarily hide that component so that we can see this negative cavity or profile that was removed from the Arbor Press P2 mold configuration. Now, this looks pretty good for our left side mold. So why don't we save this so we can use the exact same workflow on the right side? So I'm going to come up here at the top left-hand corner, go to File, Save As, and this is just giving us a warning that we're trying to save a file within the assembly. And we do want to do that. We want to link that part to this assembly, so let's hit OK. And I'm just going to name this the left side mold. I already have this here in my folder. I'm just going to save over it, and then we're going to hit yes to overwrite this. Now, one thing you're going to notice is that we saved the part and not the assembly. So on the left-hand side, we still see those visual cues that the part is highlighted in blue and that we're currently still editing the component. So if I want to get out of this component and save the assembly, I'm going to have to go to the top left-hand corner here, click Edit Component. Now you're going to be back into the assembly. We're no longer editing that part. And then we can File, Save As the assembly. So I'm going to go to File, Save As, and then we'll just name this our mold assembly. So I already have this file saved from before. I'm just going to overwrite this again, and then I'm going to move down here to the bottom right. We'll click Save, and then we'll replace this. We'll hit Yes. And then whenever you're saving an assembly that has multiple components in it, you're going to get this warning. And I don't think I can stress this enough, but always, always, always save with in-context references. If you choose to save without the in-context references, you're going to break all the links in your assembly, and your models aren't going to update against each other. So we want this to be reactive. We want this to be top-down modeling. And if we make a change, we change the configuration, we want those molds to update. So again, always, always, always save with the in-context references. We'll click this. And SolidWorks is going to open up this secondary save window that allows you to save as with references. You can see all the components that are being referenced inside of this assembly. If you wanted to, you could actually make changes to those save files. You can add a prefix, you can add a suffix, you can change the name, whatever you want to do. However, in this window, we're just going to continue on and say save all. So we're just going to overwrite these files. We're going to hit yes, and then we're going to allow this to save out. So now that we have our left side mold and our assembly saved, let's go ahead and create the right side mold using the exact same workflow. I'm just going to move up here into the top left hand corner inside my assembly tab, and I'm just going to find that insert components, hit the drop down menu, and we're going to look for new part. So click on new part. As we did before, we can either choose to select the right plane of the assembly, or if you wanted to, you can link the left side mold to the right side mold, and we can just select this face. So I'm going to select the face here from the left side mold. You can see on the left hand side that we are creating a new part, and we do see that feedback that we are editing that component. As a reminder, we did start a sketch here on that face when we selected it, so this should be relatively simple. I just want to create another extrusion that's going to match the left side mold, going 2 inches to the right. Now, I'm going to attempt to save ourselves a couple clicks here by converting all the outside edges from the left side mold. So inside the Sketch tab, I want you to find Convert Entities. We'll click on Convert Entities, and the entities that we want to convert, we can just select this entire face. Now, whenever we select a face like this, it's only going to select the outside loops unless you choose to select all inner loops. So just leave this alone for now, and we'll hit the green check mark to convert that outside profile. Now, we're just going to extrude this out like we did before, so let's move over into our Features tab. Inside of Features, we're going to find Extruded Boss Base, click on that, and just double check that we are doing a blind extrusion and that we are extruding this a distance of 2 inches and that we're extruding the right direction for the right side mold. So this all looks good to me. We can hit the green check mark to apply this boss extrude. And we've created this body for the right side mold, but we haven't removed any of the material yet using that cavity feature. So we might need to hide and unhide some of the components to make our selection process just a little bit easier. So let's hide the left side mold because we wouldn't be able to see the arbor press in between these two pieces. So in the left hand side in my feature tree, I'm going to right click on that left mold. This is going to open up that drop down menu, and we're going to look for that icon with an eyeball and a line through it to hide the components. Click on that and you can see that we've hidden the left mold. Next, we'll need to unhide the arbor press so that we can use it for our cavity feature. So in the left hand side in our feature tree, let's locate the arbor press, right click on it, and from this drop down menu we're going to look for an icon that's just an eyeball so that we can show the components. Click on show components, and then when we rotate the model around, you can actually see that we've made the arbor press visible, and we can use that for our cavity feature. So we can follow the exact same workflow from before where we go insert, features, cavity. However, I want to show you a way that we can search for features or commands just in case we don't remember where they're located. So in the top right hand corner we have this search bar, and by default it might be set to SolidWorks help, but if you hit the drop down menu you can actually change this to commands, and it's just going to be this little command prompt icon if anyone's familiar with using that. And then here inside the search commands I can just type in cavity, and it's going to look in the entire SolidWorks database for the cavity command. So we'll click cavity, and this is going to start your cavity feature here on the left hand side. So this is the exact same as if we went to insert, features, cavity. Now the design components is already recognizing that we want to use the arbor press body to remove because we had it selected when we chose to show that component. So all these selections look good to me. We can just hit the green check mark and complete this cavity feature. And just like what we did before, we can hide the body of the arbor press to see if this rebuilt the way that we wanted it to. So on the left hand side in our feature tree, I'm going to right click on that arbor press. From this drop down menu, we're going to find that icon with an eyeball and a line through it to hide the component. Click on hide components. And once again, we can see that we've created this nice negative cavity for our Arbor Press P2 mold configuration. Now that should complete the right side mold, so let's go ahead and save this with the rest of our assembly. From the top left in our toolbar, we'll go to File, Save As. And if you get this warning, you can just bypass it by clicking Save As. And we'll name this our right side mold. So I already have a file from before. I'm just going to overwrite it just like I did in previous steps. And then from the bottom right, we'll click Save. And we're going to replace this. We'll hit Yes. Next, we'll have to exit the part so that we're no longer editing it, and that way we can save our assembly. So from the top left-hand corner, we're going to find Edit Component, click on that, and you can see in the left-hand side in our feature tree, we're no longer inside that right side mold because it's not highlighted in blue. And while we're here on the left-hand side in our feature tree, let's go ahead and unhide the arbor press as well as that left side mold. So I'll click on the arbor press, I'll hold down the control key, and then I'll click on the left side mold. And while both of these are selected, I'll right click on one of them, and then we're going to open up this drop down menu, and we're just going to find this icon with the eyeball to show the components. Click show components. And then we'll just return back to the isometric view and we can save this. So I'll move out here to the viewport, I'll hit space on my keyboard, and then I'll just go to the isometric view. And then from the top left-hand corner, we'll go to File, Save As, and then we'll just save this over our existing mold assembly. So I'll click on that file that we created earlier, and from the bottom right, we'll select Save. And then this is just asking us if we want to replace it. We'll hit Yes. And that should complete your left and right side mold assembly. Now, the only thing that we have left to do is to prepare this assembly for a 2D drawing using exploded views. So inside of our assembly tab, let's find the exploded view icon. We'll click on that. And we may have to clear our selections from the left-hand side because these components are still highlighted in blue from when we chose to unhide them earlier. So if you see anything populated here underneath exploded step, right-click on that, and from the drop-down menu, we'll choose Clear Selections. And inside this exploded step, we just want to populate this with the left side mold. So I'll click on the left side mold component, and we'll pull this out using the x-axis. So if you click, hold, and drag on this x-axis, we can move this out to the left. And then we'll just update this distance here to 10 inches. And then always, as a reminder, when you want to complete that step, you have to hit done. Do not hit the green check mark because you're going to complete your exploded view and you're just going to create configuration after configuration and you're never going to be able to finish this. So again, hit done to complete that step. And then we'll do the same thing for the right side mold. So inside our exploded step field, we'll click on the right side mold. And then we're just going to pull this out using the x-axis going to the right. And then we'll just update this dimension here to 10 inches. Once again, do not hit the green check mark. You have to hit done to complete that step. And then I want you to rotate your right side mold since we can't see the cavity from this isometric view. So up here in your exploded step field, we're just going to click on the right side mold once again. And then I'm going to shift this over because it'll make it a little bit easier to see. But we'll need to use these rotation rings to rotate this part around the y-axis. And if you're not seeing these rotation rings, on the bottom left-hand corner of our exploded view window, you can see Show Rotation Rings. and you can toggle this on and off to see those rings. So we want to make sure that these are on, and we're going to use this ring right here between the Z and the X to rotate this around Y. So click, hold, and drag this, and we're going to move this until we see the cavity forward facing. And we just want to get it close because we can update the angle dimension here on the left-hand side, and I'll change this to 90 degrees, and then once again, we'll hit done. Now, the last step that we want to add is going to be on this right side mold once again, and we're just going to push it backwards so that we can center our entire assembly so that it looks good in our isometric view. So inside of this exploded step, we're just going to click on the right side mold once again, and then we're going to pull on the Z axis, and we're going to push it back here, and then we'll change this distance to 10 inches. We'll hit done, and then we'll hit the green check mark to complete this exploded view. Now let's return back to the isometric view and we can save this one last time. So I'll move my mouse out here to the viewport, I'll hit space on my keyboard, and then we'll click isometric to reorientate ourselves or fit us to the full screen. And you can see how nice this looks when we have our steps all evenly spaced out, and we can see the cavity on the left side mold as well as the right side mold. So let's go ahead and save this. I'll go to File, Save As, and once again we can just overwrite this file, and we'll just hit Save on the bottom right hand corner. We'll hit Yes to overwrite. And this is going to complete your left and right side mold assembly for your Arbor Press P2. You can use this assembly for your 2D drawings, and then you can use both sides of the mold for your Mastercam programming. And as a bad example, I wanted to show you why we needed to create that Arbor Press P2 mold configuration where we suppressed or filled all those through holes. If I right click on my component and I change the configuration from Mold P2 to Cast P2, and I hit the green check mark, this is the component that has all of the through holes in it. You can see how difficult this would be to machine, and not only machine, but pull from the mold. These bridges are going to lock that part into place after you pour the material. And again, this is a great example of that top-down modeling where if I change the configuration, all the other parts that are linked to it are going to update as well. Alright, so as promised, I'm going to show you an example of how to create a core and cavity mold assembly. This is going to end up producing a hollow or thin-walled part using a positive and a negative mold. And that's where the core and cavity terminology comes from. Whereas the example that we just completed is going to have two negative molds, which are going to be cavities, and that's going to end up producing one solid component. Now, I'm going to go through this walkthrough pretty quickly, so if you have any questions, feel free to rewind the video and find a point where I cover these topics in great detail. So the part that I currently have open is going to be our Arbor Press P2 mold configuration, and this is right before we mirrored over the body and made one solid component. So when this was cut in half, I applied a shell command to this back face, and I was able to create all these thin wall features with a typical wall thickness of 60 thousandths. So the shell command is the perfect feature for trying to house internal details like electrical or mechanical components, or even liquids in other containers. That said, let's start by creating the right side mold for this part, which is going to be the negative or the cavity. So up here in the top left hand corner, we're going to find Insert Components, hit the drop down menu, and we're going to start a new part. We're going to drop this new part here on the right plane, and then like we did before, I'm going to reorientate myself to that right plane so I can begin sketching. So inside the Sketch tab, we're going to look for our corner rectangle tool. You can hit the drop down menu and make sure that you are drawing that corner rectangle. I really don't care about the dimensions of this detail. We're just going to draw a box around the part. So just move to the bottom right of the origin. We'll click once, and then we'll drag this all the way to the top left of the piece. Click again, and then we can see that we're encompassing the entire part. So we'll hit escape so that we're not drawing any more rectangles. And then before we go into the extrusion, I'll hit space and reorientate myself to the isometric view so that this is a little bit easier to see when we begin that extrusion process. So inside of features, we're going to go and find our extruded boss base. Click on that. And this is going to be a default blind extrusion to the right side, and it's still remembering that the distance was set to 2 inches from the last example. So this looks all good to me. We can hit the green check mark and apply this. And just like what we've done before, we're going to need to add that cavity feature to remove this body from the extrusion that we just created. So up in our top toolbar, we're going to go to Insert, Features, and then we're going to find that cavity detail. And then here inside the design components, we want to add this or populate this with the Arbor Press body. However, if you try to click on this, you're probably going to get this error where it says the cavity part cannot be the same as the base part. And that just means that the surface of this extrusion is the same surface of this Arbor Press, and we can't select through it. So I'm just going to hit OK. And from the top left of our viewport, we're going to expand out our feature tree. And then inside our design components, we're going to populate this with the Arbor Press from the feature tree. So click on the Arbor Press. We can see that get populated beneath design components. And we should be able to hit the green check mark to apply this cavity. However, we're going to get this bodies to keep air. And this is letting us know that the thin wall part that we're referencing is actually going to split this extrusion into two separate bodies. The first is going to be this outside profile, which is the negative cavity mold that we're used to seeing. And the second is going to be this internal positive core that we want to remove from this mold. So we're going to actually pick selected bodies here. So click selected bodies. And this is actually going to show you the two bodies that are being separated by this feature. So if I click on body 1, it's highlighted in blue. That's going to be your negative cavity. And if I deselect that and click on body 2, this is going to be your positive core. So I want to remove the body 2 from this feature. So I'm going to deselect body 2, I'm going to select body 1, and then we're going to hit OK. And that's going to complete the cavity feature for you. We've also removed the positive core body from this mold, and I'm just going to double check this, but if you right click on this component and we choose to hide that component, you can see that we're just left with that negative profile. So let's go ahead and save this as our right side or our cavity mold. So up in the top left, we'll go to File, Save As, and this is just letting us know that we're saving the file inside the assembly. We'll hit OK, and then I'm going to name this cavity mold. And then we'll just hit the Save button from the bottom right, and now we can begin working on the left side mold or the positive core. So just as a reminder, we're currently still working here inside of that cavity mold, and we have to exit out of this component to get back into the assembly. So in the top left hand corner, we're going to click on Edit Component, and that's going to bring us back out into the assembly. We can see that because the cavity mold is no longer highlighted in blue, and this Edit Component is no longer active. So let's insert a new part for the left side mold or the positive core. So over here, Insert Components, we'll hit the drop down menu, and we're just going to find New Part. And as we mentioned before, we could drop this on the right plane, but I'm just going to link this to the existing mold, so I'm going to click on this face. Now, creating this body should be relatively easy. We're just going to select on this entire face, and inside our Sketch tab, we're going to click Convert Entities. So that's going to pick up all the outside extents of that rectangle, and just like what we did before, we're just going to move into our Features tab, and from Features, we're going to go and click Extrude Boss Base. And instead of only extruding in one direction, we're actually going to have this extrude in a second direction so that it intersects with the existing right side mold or the negative cavity. And the reason why we're doing this is we're trying to fill in the void for the positive core. So over here on the left hand side, we want to make sure that we are still extruding in direction 1. It's fine if it's set to blind and we want to make that 2 inches. However, we want to activate direction 2, so click on this little tick box. And we could leave this as a blind extrusion going 2 inches in the opposite direction. However, I want to link this to the assembly or link it to the right side mold, so we can hit the drop down menu and change it from blind to up to vertex. And then the vertex is just going to be an intersection point. I'm going to click on one of the corner points of that right side mold. And that way, if any of the parts change in shape or size, the entire assembly will rebuild with itself. So let's go ahead and hit the green check mark and apply this extrusion. And once again, we're going to have to use that cavity feature to create this positive core detail. So you could go to Insert Features Cavity. However, I'm just going to move over here to the top right hand corner, and inside my search bar, I'm going to type in cavity. I'm going to click on that cavity feature. And then over here on the left hand side, we just need to populate our design components. So we could probably safely say that the Arbor press needs to be included. So here inside design components, I'm going to click on the Arbor press from our feature tree. And then we also have to include the additional cavity mold. So this is going to be important to remove the outside edges of the positive core. So we'll click on cavity mold, and then we'll hit the green check mark. And then, as is customary with the cavity feature, it always looks like nothing happens. However, when we return back to the isometric view, and then I hide the right side mold for that negative cavity, we'll right click on that and we'll choose to hide it. And you can clearly see that we've created this boss extrusion, which is going to be the positive core for this mold assembly. And to finish this up, I'm just going to go up here to File, Save As, and we're going to save this inside the assembly. And I'm just going to name this my core mold. We'll come down here to the bottom right, we'll click Save. And then just a reminder, we're still currently working inside this core mold part. So if we want to return back to the assembly so that we can save it, we're going to have to go to Edit Component in the top left-hand corner. Click on that. That's going to bring you back out to the assembly. And then while we're here in the assembly, I'm just going to make all of my components visible. So I'll click on the Arbor press, I'll hold down the Control key, I'll click on my cavity mold, and then I'll right-click on one of those two components, and from the drop-down menu, I'll just click Show Components. This is going to turn on all of your parts, and here we can just save the entire assembly. So we'll go up here to File, Save As, and then I'm just going to save this over an existing assembly that I have for the cast and core example, and from the bottom right, we'll click Save, and I'll hit Yes to replace. So in the spirit of repeating myself, I created a finished exploded view of our cast and core assembly. I hope you enjoyed my explanation of mold making processes in SolidWorks. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.